Yes, it is. So I'm not a fan of the 16 personalities. I'm a fan of the functions. And the reason for that is there's less mind reading. When we strip it down to the functions, it gets straight, which you just noticed, like you resonated with everything she said because there's no story. What happens with the personality profiles is there's so much story and mind read, and it waters down the thinking patterns into behaviors. And so I am obsessed with the thinking. How do we gather or perceive information, and how do we choose? How do we decide? How do we judge? And so distilling it to the functions, everything I do at the moment is done through these. So there's a relationship course that I'm studying, a relationship book that my husband and I just read, and he kept saying, this doesn't resonate with me, this doesn't seem to fit well. And I'm like, what is it? Because it wasn't the philosophy, it wasn't the story that didn't fit, but it was the energy. So I started unpacking what are the cognitive functions that are being expressed right now. And they were opposite to my husband's. And I'm like, well, no wonder this doesn't feel right and doesn't feel achievable. So not completely opposite. So I am completely opposite my husband. My 4 are opposite to his 4, like just chalk and cheese. Whereas what this was an inverted 4. So Michael is an ISFP, so similar to you, because you were INFP, weren't you? Yeah. So the distinction, what flips is instead of, so he has the FITE combo that you have, and then it flips, and he's got extroverted sensation and introverted intuition, whereas yours is extroverted intuition, introverted sensation. So they flip.
Yeah.
So you're kind of halfway between us, because I've got extroverted intuition and introverted thinking, whereas he's got extroverted sensation with introverted feeling.
Got it. Yeah.
And so, but reading through this guy's book, everything was coming through the lens of extroverted thinking, which is my husband's 4th function. He's like, this just doesn't land. This feels too unfamiliar. This doesn't feel comfortable. And I'm just like, I can see exactly, it's talking to one of the weaker functions. And I'm like, it doesn't land for me either, because extroverted thinking is my 6th function. So the cognitive stack actually goes beyond the 4. You actually get all 8.
Okay.
But I love them. They are how we all process information and make decisions. It just puts the language around it. So when I'm listening to clients these days, I'm listening for, well, how did they come up with that? Were they gathering their information through sensation or intuition? Are they processing their information with logic or feeling? It looks complicated. Like it looks like a periodic table, and it looks highly once you get the basics of it, though, it is so easy to read and so easy to help a client find their path.
Now that I look back, so the first coach I worked with, like officially worked with, 2.5 years ago, didn't have the money to afford her, but she was running a kind of an, I don't know, internship program. So I worked for her, and in return, she offered me her coaching. The first thing she made me do was do this test, the 16 personality test. So I've done this, like this was the 3rd time I did it. First time I did it in, I think, maybe 2016, second time in 2020, and 3rd time now. I've seen different results all 3 times.
What were the differences, just out of curiosity? Do you remember?
So I think I was ISFJ. I don't know, maybe. Can you give me like a minute? I think I'll have the email. I'll probably have the email. I'll check it right away.
There's a couple of things that'll change it. One is the testing that you do it through. So each test has its own focus points. And many of the tests don't understand the distinctions between J and P. And many trainers, like I've seen a ton of videos, and it just doesn't align with how Jung intended it. And it was based off Jung that Myers and Briggs developed the personalities. And so where they've incorporated weirdness into the interpretation, you'll get a different result. Weirdness is probably more judgmental than I mean it to be, but you get what I mean.
Just a minute. Just a second. Because instead of, like assuming, I just remember that I probably would have the email. Yeah, so so interesting. I really wish it must be there. Needs to be there. Yeah, I can't see it. Why can't I see it? Yeah, I don't know. It's lost somewhere in the emails. And it was like way back in 2020. But it was probably not INFP. Like from what I remember, it was, I think, ISFJ, probably. But then again, I didn't understand it as deep as I'm able to understand it right now. Back then, it was kind of, just like, let me get over, let me do this quickly. And before than that, I remember in 2015 or 16 when I did it first time, instead of I got E, extrovert, in the beginning, and then went through a phase of depression and anxiety. And then I remember I can see, the changes in me. Instead of being an extrovert, I could see that, I'm more of an ambivert leaning towards introvertism.
Oh, am I going to do my ambivert rant?
What do you mean by that?
So there's no such thing as ambivert. It is a misnomer. There is also no such thing as purely extroverted or purely introverted. It is also a misnomer. So the perception that, so we have a preference one way or the other towards introversion or extroversion. Different circumstances, we will act in different ways. And this is where the obstacle of looking at behaviors kicks in. If you look at behaviors, I can see how people conclude that there is ambivert extrovert. But if we look at preferences and our default preference, that doesn't change. So our default preference based on the direction, it's a filter direction. Is our primary filter direction internal or external? Is it introverted or extroverted? It has nothing to do with behaviors, and it has nothing to do with social skills, and it has nothing to do with being talkative or not talkative. It also has nothing to do with the way we can think and what we can access. We all have, as you see, there are 8 cognitive functions. All of them are available to us.
Yeah.
So everyone is an ambivert or no one is an ambivert. And Jung says no one is an ambivert. He also says that no one is always extroverted and no one is always introverted. But we have a preference.
So what I remember is last time when I did this test, I got 55% I. So they gave you the scores. They didn't give the score in this test, but in that test, they gave you the scores.
Because it's inaccurate.
Probably.
So the obstacle with all of these tests is they rely on our self-perception. But how accurate is our self-perception?
Yeah, so that is the very first thing. So this is like the third session I'm in, right? In all the three sessions, whenever I took a test, the first thing was I could see two different ways I could answer a question. One is where I am right now, like I'm in this middle transition, messy. And second is who I usually am or who I usually think I am. So
Yeah,
I
and
could see
it's the who I think I am as opposed to who I naturally am. And therein lies the inaccurate. And I'm not saying like you're not alone in that. We're all doing that.
yeah.
But therein lies the inaccuracy of the tests because we answer it through our filters of who we think we are, not who we truly are. Now, as we close that gap between, so there's three layers of self. There's who we say we are, who we think we are, and who we truly are. As we close the gap between who we think we are and who we truly are, the more accurate our results will be on these profiles.
Yes.
Because we're so aware of ourselves. It's also not what are we good at. So my first results came out as ENTJ. And the J and the P completely flip the functions. So they completely invert them.
Mm-hmm.
So I came out as ENTJ. So my stack is, let me just bring them up on the screen actually, because it's easier to see them. I shared that PDF in the chat, didn't I?
Yeah.
3P Club chat. So if I just share my screen.
Yeah.
So ENTP, NETIFESINITEFISE, which I know sounds like weird periodic tables. Now, to get to the ENTJ, I've got to scroll down. No, it should actually be here. So where am I? ENTJ. So down here. I don't know that I can get them side by side in this screenshot. Let me just zoom out just a fraction. So you can see, so what flips? So instead of TI, I get TE. Instead of NE, I get NI, and then the same SE. So the switch from P to J changes the direction filter of all of the functions. So my initial result was ENTJ. When I listened to the discussion between P and J, I tend to be more controlling. I tend to like order in my outside world. I tend to be bossy and annoying. Like there's a whole pile of things that resonate in that. And so based on what I'm good at and based on behaviors, I lean towards J. When I look beyond behaviors to my natural preference, I am a P. So if you think back to years ago, and I hope it doesn't happen in schools anymore, but years ago, being left-handed was considered demonesque and possessed. And obviously it's not. It's simply a preference of which hand do you write with, your left or your right. There's nothing wrong with either preference, except that they used to hit kids with the ruler if they were writing with their left hand, so they'd write with their right hand and bandage them up. So those kids all learnt to write with their right hand because they had to. It was the only way for them to function. But that didn't make them right-handed. It just made them competent writing with their right hand. It didn't make them right-handed, but they looked right-handed. And they pretended to be right-handed because that was how they protected themselves and kept themselves safe. Why did I learn TE? Exactly the same reason, though I wasn't being slapped with a ruler for using my TI. But I was taught that extroverted thinking was what I needed. With no malice on my parents' part, just no awareness of Myers-Briggs cognitive functions. So I was taught that TE was good, and I got really frigging to the point that I became a productivity coach, which is completely based in extroverted thinking. And people tell me all the time how good I am at it. And yes, I am really fucking good at TE. But in terms of preference, it's down here, and I resent it. I hate it. It drains my energy. My preference is TI and NE, and playing a completely different ball game.
Yeah.
And so what happens in the tests, though, is we do the tests and we answer it the way we think we should, particularly if we've got shame or guilt or fear around the answers of our true self. So my extroverted intuition was very denied. And so TE was much safer for me. So that's where I land. So the results will lean in that direction. But it's not what are we good at? It's what lights us up. Where are we delighted? What is more natural to us? And the kids that wrote with their left hands that learnt to write with their right hands, they would have got really good at writing with their right hands.
Yes.
But it still felt weird and uncomfortable for them.
I totally relate to what you're saying.
Mm.
The first test results I had being an extrovert, yeah, that was probably not who I was. It's something I picked up.
Society tells us that extroversion is better, and I'm all for that. As an extrovert, that doesn't bother me particularly. But society is geared for extroverts.
Yeah.
Introverts, I mean, so introversion tends to be judged by society. Intuition tends to be judged by society, and feeling tends to be judged by society. So those three functions,
yeah,
you can have a hard time embracing them. Extroverted thinking and sensation are the ones that are most approved of. Literal, logical, societal approval. They're the ones that society approves of. SE and TE.
Yeah.
They're what, I mean, when you look at the ENTJ profile, that's what I get as my extroverted SE and TE. Like that's what's approved of. We go to my actual profile, we've got NE and FE. No wonder I felt inclined to answer differently. But the more I played with it, the more I studied, I'm like, this is not a match. If TE is my dominant, I should love organizing my household. I should love all of these extroverted thinking processes. And it was when I was doing a relationship course with the personality hacker people. And I'm sitting there, I'm listening to the TE, and I'm like, I hate this stuff. I'm really good at it, but it drains me. And I'm like, my results can't be accurate. Because if this is draining me, then it is not my natural, it's not my default. And so that's what we want to test. Does the result align with our best fit? Oh my God, this delights me and lights me up. Yeah. Which may mean working through some of the shame, the guilt, and the fear of having had it rejected as a child to get to a place of acceptance of it.
So when I did my certification, it was not a very extensive certification. It was like a 2-month program on a very specific way of coaching. It was text-based coaching on how to create habits, which totally resonates with the TE, the extroverted thinking, the effectiveness.
Yeah.
Kind of liked it, picked up a new skill. I tried calling myself certified habit coach, but I knew, this doesn't sound like me. I'm not like the productivity guru kind of person. I know how to create habits. Like it's the one skill I don't talk a lot about. But yeah, not me.
So TE is your 3-year-old. Yeah. Yeah, so it's there. It's a blind spot. It's worth doing that study for yourself, but it's not going to be where your superpower resides. So I like cognitive functions because if you're operating from your top 2 cognitive functions, you are playing in your superpowers. That is where your superpowers will be found. And it's where we feel most aligned. It's where we feel at our best. And so for me, that's extroverted intuition coupled with introverted thinking. Hence this. So if we look at the lens of cognitive functions, why does Amy choose to do an exploration conversation about models that we apply to ourselves? Like that is my cognitive functions in action. We're going to explore these models that we apply to ourselves. It is just so obvious to me why this is my happy place.
Yeah, I match with you on that, the extroverted intuition.
Yes, the extroverted intuition we're matched on. I'm curious, have you done any work around values? Did your coaching course cover values? Is that something that resonates more for you? Yeah.
I do the value-based marketing. So like one of the things I offer is literally you will find everywhere that you cannot find a post or a profile of mine without the word love in it, because love is the highest value that I have. So it just makes common sense for me to use that word again and again. Like it's whenever I use the word, it feels like it's me.
And so when you say values-based marketing, because everyone has different meanings for that, do you actually elicit clients' values and do marketing based on their emotional, like the consistent emotional states that they're wanting?
So this is the area where I'm exploring. Like this is the area where I'm heading. It's like I've not been doing it for years now, but for the past couple of months, like I've started putting my dedicated attention to this path.
Yep. And do you do a values elicitation process with your clients? Is that something you've learned?
I've started
too. Yeah. Is there so I have 3 different values processes that I use. So values is not my strength, which is why I continued looking for better. And I've now worked out that introverted thinking works way better for me than the values. Over the years, though, I've used Danielle Laporte's desire mapping to elicit values.
I need more resources on this, the values part.
What was that? You need more resources?
Yeah.
So these are the resources that I would recommend. Danielle Laporte's desire mapping. It's a book.
Okay.
VIA strengths, which is values in action.
I know about can you mention this somewhere? Would that
I'll send it in I'll send you a message. And then the other one I use for values is DeMartini's process, which is just a free online quiz.
What I'm doing right now, not a very accurate method, but based on self-reflection, that there is a list of 100 values, which are the, like, let's say 20 values you resonate the most with, and let's prioritize them.
Yep. Yeah, which is, it is an effective system. It actually is quite good. The other way I've been taught to do it is to ask, based on your current results, what are the emotional experiences that you value the most? And they just give you the words.
Repeat the question again. That's a really good question.
So based on your current result, because I don't give a fuck what they think their values, they'll say the question again properly for a minute for the recording as well.
That's why I said I don't believe that's a great way what I'm doing, but like it's a start.
Yeah, it's definitely really, but so we have aspirational values and our actual values.
Yes.
And so when you ask people what they think they value, 9 times out of 10, you'll get a blend of aspirational and actual. The question, based on your current results, what are the emotional states that you value on a consistent basis, which pushes away the aspirational and pulls out the actual. And it can be an uncomfortable process for clients. It's like, okay, well, this is what I'm doing. So based on my current results, what have I done today? Well, so based on today, like what have I done today? Because we're living our values all the time. We can't not live our values. And that's another piece that people really struggle with. It's like, I've got this value, but I don't live up to it. Then it's not your value, it's aspirational. And I'm really direct on that with my clients, because buying into a value is there when it's not being lived up to is not helpful to anybody. So if you can't demonstrate to me where you live the value, it's not your value.
So I do recognize what I'm doing is, so one column is, okay, let's prioritize the values first. The second column is, what's your current score? So like out of 10, what are you, how much are you practicing this right now? And the third column is, how can you practice this more? So like if love is your value, how can you practice love more?
That is a really cool process to do.
Yeah, that is based a little bit more on the aspirational part and a little bit less on, where you are right now. It's like a little bit more future focused.
It is. It's aspirational and it's future focused, which a lot of people will love. The pain of facing a value that you don't want to own can be quite transformational as well. It's not comfortable, and it takes a level of skill as a coach to hold the space for that discomfort. But yeah, if they can't demonstrate, it's like, tell me how you lived that. So this morning I got up at 5 a.m. and showed up to a networking group. I don't know what my value is in that, but there's clearly something that I'm living. Connection, community, conversation, exploration, comradeship, following through on keeping my promises. All of that is because I did not want to get out of bed at 5 a.m. this morning. So my willingness to get up at 5 a.m., like, what are you willing to get up at 5 a.m. for? That will start to elicit. And that's where I like the D-Martini, because it's, what are you spending your time, your money, your energy, your effort? What's your space filled with? It goes into they're really good. Even if you just go do the quiz, pull the questions out to incorporate into your coaching, you'll enhance your coaching massively. So I got up at 5 a.m. I did that. I then scrolled through Facebook for about an hour and a half. And I don't want to feel into what that value is. So here you start to see I don't know that I want to own I don't even know what it was. Actually, you know what it is? It's significance. So the scrolling through Facebook, I was answering questions. I was sharing my wisdom. So I value wisdom. Wisdom is definitely a value. Can you see how, like, just what have you done before we got to this session today? So 5 a.m. networking, scrolled Facebook for an hour. I drove my daughter to school. Family is important to me. Time with my daughter is important. We had a great conversation in the car. I came home. I did a accountability session with some buddies. Accountability is important. Social obligation is probably more the word that I'd use rather than accountability for that. But we had a chat and we talked about marketing. And so you can hear my values coming through in the behaviors. And then I took Patrick for a driving lesson. So again, we're back to family, helping my kids. And then I sat and I watched Netflix for an hour, because comfort and chill and relax are things that I want to. They used to be aspirational values. To be comfortable, to be happy and joyful and enjoy myself. And they were aspirational. There's no evidence of that. There is a lot of evidence of comfort. There is a lot of evidence of relaxation in my world now. There is a lot of episodes on Netflix watched to demonstrate that value. And while I was doing it, I was solving puzzles on my phone, because I value puzzle solving, whatever we call that as a value. And then problem solving, and critical thinking, like problem solving and critical thinking. It's and I'm hearing my cognitive functions in, like, there's exploration and introverted thinking just in so much, with a hint of extroverted feeling, where I'm going and doing stuff with the kids to make them, like, Patrick needs to practice and do driving lessons. But yeah, that's a cool way to elicit them.
What I'm also getting is our beliefs, individual beliefs, are formed based on these four characters. Because so what I believe is, because this introverted feeling, the authenticity is like the leading factor in me. I have this very strong belief that the only reason I need, like, the biggest reason, not the biggest reason I would want to work with a coach or get, enroll in a course, is that it needs to help me be more of myself.
Yeah, more authentic. It has to be authentic, which is FI in action. Whereas for me, I want the models. I want a logic. It's not that I want to feel more authentic and get to know myself through feelings. I want to make sense to myself. I'm logicking myself.
Yeah. So this is heavy to recognize now. This is one battle I've been fighting for a long time. Not so much in the last couple of months or years, but the logical thinking versus the feeling, like internal feeling. The world tells you, society tells you, especially if you're a male, that it needs to be logic based. And I'm not a very good logic person when I am in my healthiest sense.
There's a book coming for that, because I was very frustrated with the book that Michael and I read last week on relationships that kept so as far as I can tell, the guy that wrote it was an ESTJ. And everything was based in extroverted thinking And actually, I'm still tossing up whether he's ENTJ or ESTJ. His dominant function is definitely extroverted thinking. I can't tell whether the intuition is self-focused or globally focused. And so I keep tossing up between, so if we go back to those functions again, share screen.
You can share the screen.
Yeah. So what do I want? I want, it was J, so
ESTJ is like the last, I think.
Yeah, so I keep tossing up between ESTJ and then ENTJ will be on the other one. So ENT, so the middle two functions swap. So whether it's introverted intuition or extroverted intuition is what I'm toying with. So this one.
What would
Definitely.
introverted intuition mean? Extroverted intuition would mean the exploration part. Oh, so introverted intuition mean going deep, like asking why.
Introverted intuition is perspective. So what shifts predominantly between the introverted and extroverted functions is our direction filter. Are we applying it to self or are we applying it to the world around us? So introverted intuition. So intuition is a gathering function. So it's where do we source our information from? So extroverted information, we source our information through conversation, through people. It's the world around us that we're intuiting.
Yep.
And so I gather my information through intuition, but it's from the world around me. It's not anything in me. Like people say, oh, you're so intuitive. You must feel into your gut a lot. I'm like, no, it's got nothing to. Whereas introverted intuition is that gut feeling and instinct, which has just made me the distinction. He is definitely the ENTJ because his descriptions are feel into your gut, follow your instincts, which is all introverted intuition. So the book is written for an ENTJ and it comes with this masculine, you must have extroverted thinking, you must do all of the planning, you must do all of the my husband is an ESFP. No, EISFP. So extroverted thinking, same as like he's the same as you, except that he's a S instead of an
authenticity.
E. And so the TE is in his fourth. So the idea of planning, it just doesn't light him up. Doesn't light me up either, which is why he's been delegated again, because mine's so low. But this guy has written this book through this lens of masculine men plan and follow their gut. And my husband is like, no, masculine men know their values and interpret their surroundings. Now, neither is wrong, but neither is right for the other person.
Yeah.
And so he and I are going to write a book because there is a lot of lessons I'm taking from this other person, but this one size fits all masculine men must have extroverted thinking is fucking up society. Like and feminine women, so I don't fit the feminine women because I don't know what the ideal feminine women type would be. It would be maybe ENFJ, FENI, or maybe ESFJ.
So the ideal would be extroverted?
Well, it could be. So it could be the ISFJ as well. What I'm looking at is the extroverted feeling in the top two. Because the woman's meant to care about all of the people around her and the nurture, or all of that comes from extroverted feeling. The driver for that is extroverted feeling. Whether it's extroverted feeling coupled with introverted intuition, and I imagine based on his teachings, it would be ENFJ paired with ENTJ. But he doesn't share enough about his wife for me to work out what she is. And he might be an
What
introvert.
about the introverts? Yeah, I think probably introvert would be the ideal state, no?
For a woman, maybe.
Yeah.
No, he wants us to express our feelings. He's open to the extrovert. His wife is definitely an extrovert, and she is held up as the pillar of perfection, which is lovely for her, but it's not good for any of us that don't compare to her. My husband would hold me up as the pillar of perfection for a woman as well. Like, be more like Amy. Amy is amazing. He has such blinkers on to my flaws, and I have no desire to change that.
I definitely feel, so what I'm getting from this conversation is specifically people who are coaches, mentors, teachers, who are going to, teach or coach or pass on the information or, facilitate some change. We need to look beyond ourselves.
Yes.
And actually become aware of, all these functions.
Yes.
In order to, I don't know, like be more effective or in order to be true for them.
Well, and to coach well. So if we think all masculine men look like an ENTJ, which I don't, then we're going to dismiss anyone outside of that box. So you get an ENFJ come to you.
So I have like 3.
I guarantee you she's ENFJ. The more I look at this, because that's literally upside down.
Yeah.
Almost. No wonder she happily surrenders to him planning. I could be completely wrong. But yes, the more we understand this, the more we can see what's missing. So these are direction filters. Are we focused on thinking or feeling? Are we applying that thinking to self or to others?
Yeah.
So I've got introverted thinking. Like if I was doing a coaching session as a client, introverted thinking would come up fairly quickly as my decision-making process. What am I deleting? Because I'm deleting extroverted thinking, but I'm also deleting extroverted feeling, and I'm deleting introverted feeling. There are 4 decision-making functions. And when we're aware of that as coaches, we can invite our clients to think through all 4 of those and make healthy, robust, sustainable choices for themselves, instead of getting limited and deleting. So are we looking through thinking and feeling? Are we looking through intuition and sensation? And are we looking through introverted and extroverted? They're the 3 things that I'm looking for when helping a client make a decision these days. Have we looked at enough perspectives? And anyone in conflict, all I've got to do is table a different. So if I was in conflict, so I hit my, what's my word? My fucked upness is based in cognitive dissonance. I was looking for a better word, didn't come. So I will get caught in like the TI, and I'm stuck in cognitive dissonance, and I can't make a decision because part of me is this and part of me is that, and logic is not helping. All right, so TI is not working for the decision. Let's look at TE, or let's look at FI, or let's look at FE. Let's move from the TI to one of these other things and then bring it back and reincorporate it into my TI. Because what happens is we get stuck in deleting something. So some people will get stuck. So as a double decider, so whatever the second and third functions are, so if they're decision functions, we're double deciders. If they're gathering functions, we're double gatherers. And double decider sounds much more pleasant than double gatherer, but there's nothing wrong either way.
Decider and gatherer?
What was that?
What's the difference between decider and gatherer?
So the double gatherers will get stuck in information gathering more easily, and they will keep searching for the right piece of information to help them to help them find the
Yeah,
thing
that
to
sounds
help
like
them
me.
make the decision.
Sounds like me.
Double deciders. So double gatherers are seeking information to help them find the answer. Double deciders have enough information, but they've got conflicting choice points.
Analysis paralysis kind of thing.
Well, for me, it's the cognitive dissonance. So it's like, if I do this way,
Yeah.
and then if I do this way. And so where my internal thinking clashes with the world around me's feelings,
Yeah.
I'm fucked. Because I'm like, well, what I want to do is this, but that's going to hurt your feelings. I don't want to hurt your feelings, and I want to conform to societal values, extroverted feeling. And I go backwards and forwards, and it's not so much analysis paralysis, it's just a stuck, but I'm bouncing between decisions. Whereas double gatherers, it's like, if I could just find this piece of information, then I can make a decision. But that's the distinction between the two. It's a really cool thing to know about our clients.
Yeah.
Because so there's a couple of loops we can get stuck in. So we can get stuck in a first third loop where we're denying our internal self. So I think you're the other way around. So introverts, you're denying your extroverted self if you get stuck in that first loop. So I get caught in NE-FE, whereas you would be caught in FI-SI, and you'd stop exploring the world and you'd kind of retreat into your shell.
Exactly what happened with my certification, as I mentioned. So it was based on a lot of, effectiveness, habits, productivity, and I was stuck in like the third. Instead, I started feeling more of myself when I started focusing on the authenticity part. For sure.
So we can be pushed into that loop. We can also get pushed into the upside down stressed loop, where we operate from our fourth and third functions. So under stress, we'll turn upside down, which actually sounds like possibly what you ended up in, because the TE focus was so strong. So you coupled TE with SI, which is a good pairing. Yeah, so we'll do a 4-3 loop, and we can also do like a 2-4 loop.
Yeah.
So for you, that would be denying your internal self and focusing on the external world. The 1-3 loop is quite common. The 2-4 loop less so. The 4-3 loop is quite common as well. Under stress will invert. It's like, okay, well, my normal decision-making process isn't working for me.
Yeah.
I will go to, okay, so exploration accuracy is not working for me. I'm going to go to my memory and the world around me and go to creating harmony. So under pressure, I look for a internal reference point, like, what have I done that has worked like this before? Where have I succeeded? And that's only because I've got really good quality questions now. I used to previously ask my poor introverted sensation, where have we fucked this up before? How badly is this going to go wrong? It's the quality of our question that we're plugging into our gathering functions makes a huge difference. My default now is, what's the reference point of success for this? Which is a really good question to ask introverted sensation. What's the reference point of success for this? And so I'll find the reference point of success. And then what does everyone around me need? How do I because if I'm under pressure, generally it's because there's a lack of harmony. So under stress, we'll go to the 4-3. But often what's happening is people are denying their secondary function and they're just going to their first and their third. So either introverts are introverting more and reclusing into their own world and hiding from everybody else. The extroverts are extroverting more and denying their inner world even exists. And I lived there for way too long. So we are clients, what we want to do, are they looking to the world around them for something? Or are they either perceiving or deciding based on the world around them? And do they have the complementary perceiving, deciding internally? So we need a perceiving function, so either intuition or sensation, to gather the information through. And then we need a deciding function to do something with that information. And so that's where we want to encourage our clients. What's the perceiving function they're using? and then what's the counterpart. So if they're perceiving stuff, if they're perceiving from the world around them, they need to decide internally, or they're in a loop. If they're perceiving internally, then they need an external check. So my mentor taught, you go inward, you find your answers, and then you do an external check. She had TE, so I'm pretty sure she's an INTJ. So you do an internal gathering. What does your gut say about this?
Yeah.
And then you do an external check based on logic. So INTJ, and that's what she taught was the best decision-making strategy. And it was the best decision-making strategy for her.
For her, yeah. Is it the same for me, I think? Can you see INFP?
So you have an inner deciding function.
Yeah.
And an external gathering. So you intuit from, which is why you signed up to this course, because you want to gather information from the world around you, preferably intuitively. And most people are talking about literal stuff. And so you seek out a fellow NE user who's going to talk intuitively and understand that and respect it. Because, oh my God, do I respect the extroverted intuition? Like, so respect it. So you'll seek out, you'll gather information through extroverted intuition, and then you'll decide based on your values. Does that feel authentic? That's your core. So my core inner deciding is, does that make sense to me?
Yeah.
So introverted feeling is, does it feel authentic? Introverted thinking is, does that make sense to me? I don't care about anyone else. I only care about me. And the same for the introverted feeling. You don't care about whether it feels good for anyone. It's like, does it feel good for me? Is it aligned with my authenticity? The extroverted thinking is, does that make sense for the collective? And the extroverted feeling is, does that align with the collective values?
Yeah. Is it okay if I just pick your brain for like 1 minute more?
Go for it.
So a very typical question for me to ask based on my profile, how would you recommend, I double down all these strengths? Or do you feel it would be more effective? I don't know, if I go with the things that I don't notice right now.
So hang on, let me just turn off this share so I can see your face better. So ask that again.
So one question that's coming to my mind is, would it be more effective? Would it help me, again, be more of myself and get the experiences, get the results if I double down on the first 1 or 2 values? Or would it be more effective and help me feel more of myself if I work on the last 4 values, like out of 8, the functions?
It's funny because you've gone for an effectiveness question, which is your 4th, which just strikes me as, because everything is like, would it be more effective if I did this or this? And that it was the what's more effective to find myself, so I'm just playing back what I'm hearing in your question. I will answer your question. But so the word effective is like, okay, so you're looking for extroverted thinking. What makes sense logically in terms of making order in the world around me? And then it's the, how do you connect authentically with yourself, which is the introverted feeling. So you've got both of your deciding functions coming out in that question.
Yeah.
So in terms of accessing your top 4, I think you probably got that, like in terms of the deciding function, your quality of question there speaks to both of those. So what's most effective? That's a TE question. You're clearly connected with your TE because you're asking what's most effective.
Yeah.
What's most effective to help me connect more with myself and be authentic? You've got both of those top 2 deciding functions. Now, it depends on what you're wanting to make a decision about. So if you're wanting to make a decision about how to rock out in your business, TEFI combination is going to work really well. Okay. If you're wanting to make a decision based on how you're working in relationships.
That connected dots for me. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go on, please.
Well, if you're wanting to So say, for example, you're looking at family harmony.
Yeah.
What's the most effective way for me to feel authentic is probably not the best question to ask on how to align family values. You then want to look at an FE question. And if we're going to look at FE, then we've got to partner it with TI, or you could partner FE and TE together and use an internal gathering function.
Yeah.
So it depends on where it is that you're wanting to get the results, because the different functions play out differently in different scenarios. What is effective to you in this question?
I think I got the essence of what I was about to ask. So let's say I need more work on, I want more work on the business. So introverted feeling and extroverted thinking, the authenticity and effectiveness is
are the decision functions.
Yeah.
But then the question is, how are you gathering the information?
Through these conversations.
Well, and I'm going to endorse that. Why would I not? Putting my self-motives aside for a moment, extroverted intuition is your strength. Like, that's an easy win. And
This
for
is
business, that will work really well to some degree. There is also, and it depends on what kind of, so you're looking at marketing. So if you're doing marketing in business, that is an extroverted thinking process. I mean, yes, you're wanting to connect to values. Yes, there is a heart-centered piece of it. I'm not saying there's not feelings involved, but it's a logical, linear process. If you were coaching sexual abuse victims, I would probably move you a little bit away from TE and a little bit more towards FE and collective values. And so it depends on what you're using it for.
So true. That's so true. FE would makes even more sense when I'm doing workshops and group coaching sessions.
And then you can bring to it, when you're doing workshops and group coaching sessions, are you ticking off other people's? So if you do a group workshop, and I've been to them, where someone leverages the FITI decision-making functions and doesn't look at the FETI decision-making functions, I sit there and go, oh my God, I don't get it. I don't understand. There's something wrong with me.
Exactly.
Whereas the moment someone says, some of you are going to look at the logic of what's happening in the world around you, and some of you are going to apply the logic to yourself. And you don't have to say it that directly, but give them the permission to process the information their way. Like I said, my mentor taught me, you do, you gather information internally, and then you do an external check. That is the best. So her wording was, that is the best decision-making strategy. No, it's not. Not for me. I gather information intuitively, and then I do an internal check, because what that did was pushed me into denying my inner world completely.
Yeah.
Because I gathered information and I did an external check, but at no point did I do, because I wasn't gathering information from inside, I was gathering information from the world around me. I would do an external check, but where was I in this? And so teaching the entire set of cognitive functions is the best way to help people make decisions. Now, in your marketing workshops, you're probably not teaching people to make decisions. But when you think about marketing, so marketing is an extroverted process. It's how we engage with the world around us.
Yeah.
And we want to know our values, and we want to know what makes sense to us. We want to do the inner world stuff, and then we want to go to the outer world. So you want to incorporate internal feeling and internal thinking as the decision-making process. Like, what's important to you, what matters to you. So what's important to you, what matters to you, and what makes sense to you. That's your internal feeling and internal thinking covered. So incorporate both into any exercises you do, and you've ticked both boxes. And then incorporate systems, extroverted thinking, with market research, extroverted feeling, and you've covered all of them.
What I'm getting is, for sure, what you just mentioned makes so much sense. At the same time, one idea that I got was, again, the extroverted intuition. This session, whatever we discussed in last 1 hour, is like one of the best ways to teach, like respect the client's map of the world.
Absolutely.
One of the best ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Map is not the territory. Foundation coaching model.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is how you elicit their map of the world.
Exactly.
Because what happens for coaches is we ask a question, we process it through our own functions, the client's giving us a completely different answer. When we can navigate through, like you said before, when we can navigate through all of these 8 functions and know what we're hearing from our clients and recognize, was that a literal statement? Are they more literal? Are they more intuitive? Are they more sensational, more intuitive? Are they making their decisions based on feelings or facts? And are they applying those feelings and facts to themselves or to the world around them? Like it's so simple to recognize and see. So what the beauty of this for me is it is the perfect pairing of extroverted intuition and introverted thinking, because I gather the information from the client and using my intuition, I look for the meaning and the code and the pattern, and then I use my logic to deduct what it is. Like it's a perfect partnership for me. But even if you just try it on and just check in with them. So what I'm hearing from you, really like to explore things. You do that. And so an NE and an SE user will say yes to that. You really like to explore the world around you. Absolutely. When you're exploring the world around you, what are you noticing? Well, I notice the colors in the trees. I notice the ground under my feet. I notice all of that's literal. All right, I've now got an SE user. I noticed the patterns. I love watching people and seeing how human behavior patterns come out. Or I love seeing how, I love looking at the leaves of the trees and seeing the intricacies that are in every leaf and how all of these patterns are like, I don't know what that looks like because it's not
Also, like, how is it making me feel? Like, what do I feel when I see this kind of? Is that also SI?
Yeah, so SI is the inner gathering.
Yeah.
They're less likely to be looking at the world around them. So I like walking through the bush because it reconnects me to my core. They're not going to tell you about the trees. They're going to tell you about the inner world while they're in the outer world.
Yes, that is me. That is totally me.
And so it's not noticing the trees because I don't care about the trees. It's when I'm out in the world. And the SI tends to be a past-based. It's less present and more, I remember walking through the trees. And I remember, whereas the SE is like, can we go for a walk in the bush? I don't remember anything. I just want to have, so past versus present comes in, SI versus SE, past versus present creeps in. And so the SE is what I'm feeling right now, whereas SI is I recall feeling. SI, defining moments is a really, I don't know if that's an exercise you're familiar with in coaching, but defining moments is a really good exercise for SI users. It's in the book called something by Dr. Phil, Self Matters by Dr. Phil.
Okay.
So he goes into defining moments and pivotal people and those kinds of things.
Can you please send me the list of resources you mentioned? I'd really like.
Let me do it now while we're chatting because otherwise I'm going to forget. So it was, oops, hang on, X. So Self Matters by Dr. Phil. And then it was the values, wasn't it? So VIA strengths, DeMartini values. I've spelled DeMartini wrong, but you'll know what I mean. And desire mapping by Danielle Laporte. And I do have, like, I've done a full training on values, but for empowering the client to do it themselves, those 3 processes, I think Self Matters might have a values thing in it as well. on some level. It looks at a bunch of stuff. But one of the keys to be aware of as coaches, what's our default? And can we recognize who our default's not going to be a match for? Because there's not one size fits all. So I know the way I work. Someone the other day asked me, how do you do blah-de-blah? And I'm like, my answer is not going to serve you. Because how I do it and how they would do it with their cognitive functions, it was a learning strategy or something. I'm like, how I gather information from the world and manage to process models is not going to help you when they were an introvert and their stack was completely upside down to mine. So they had introverted intuition and extroverted sensation, and then they had introverted feeling and extroverted thinking. I'm like, there is no point in me sharing how I learn, because I literally absorb information from the world around me and then I make sense of it internally. She's like, I can't do that. And I'm like, no, I know. That's why I told you that it was not helpful to share that with you, because and it's the same. My mentor, that's the best decision-making strategy. Well, it was the best decision-making strategy for her. The relationship coach, masculine men look like, no, they don't.
I am very masculine,
setting
but I don't
men
have...
up to have to.
Yeah.
So setting men up to feel less than because their TE function is detrimental. Setting women up to feel like failures because they have introverted thinking instead of introverted feeling, or they're driven more by their introverted thinking than their extroverted feeling, to push me into extroverted. And I've lived that for way too long. It's not going to happen. No one's going to push me out of my introverted thinking. Is my freaking greatest gift, as is my extroverted intuition. Like those top two functions, that is where I operate best. That is where I am in flow. That is where I will surrender. You meet those, I will submit to anybody that puts those forward, because he's talking about submission and leadership. You lead me through those functions, I will follow you anywhere. But you make me come from a different angle, you're going to hit resistance, because it's instantly. So our ego lives in our introverted decision-making function. So introverted feeling or introverted thinking, that's where our ego lives. You tell me that I'm not allowed to have logic and I'm not allowed to try and make sense of myself and the world around me, you're going to hit resistance and masses of it, because that's where my ego lives, and you're going to trigger it massively. You let me make sense of things, then I will take care of the world around me. I will definitely tap into extroverted feeling. Like, it's there, just don't challenge my ego in the process.
Yeah.
And don't tell me that my husband has to be like the setting up. Well, so the setup of him having to have the extroverted feeling, extroverted thinking as his dominant. The biggest problem with that is that when he doesn't, I then become highly judgmental. So they're actually fueling the judgment. It's not what my husband. So he's got introverted feeling as his dominant, like you, and extroverted thinking's there. It's there in his fourth, and he's learning to use it, but it's not his primary. And if I judge him against how well he can use an inferior function, and I don't mean inferior as it, but it's just, it sits in that inferior spot. Yeah. I'm always going to be judging him. That's not helpful. Yeah. Where does my husband do the sensation thing? So he has extroverted sensation, introverted feeling, and extroverted sensation. If I want something from my husband, I want his help with something, all I need to do is speak through. So it has to align with his values, because if it doesn't align with his values, it's not fucking happening, because his ego lives in the introverted feeling, and there's a really strong gatekeeper. Doesn't align with his values, it's not happening. And I actually love that. I think that is a wonderful thing for him to have, except when it gets in my way of me getting what I want. And then I don't think it's so wonderful. But generally, I think it's wonderful. So if it aligns with his values, if he thinks of it himself, we're good. And then if I am literal, this is what I want. No hinting, no talking about feelings or need. Just, this is what, would you make me a cup of tea, please? Be literal, be specific, and something that he can do physically. Would you sit down with me and talk to me about this coaching model, please? Do I have to indulge your extroverted intuition right now? Like, and fair call on his, and he is so indulgent of it, to his credit. And he is more indulgent of it now, where I am tolerant of, and not tolerant of, accepting of, and grateful for his extroverted sensation. The more I accept him, the more he indulges me.
Yeah.
Rather than, why can't you think like I do, which I've said far more than I care to count over the last 2 decades.
Yeah.
Because we think so differently. And Myers-Briggs cognitive stacks was our pathway to understanding, not just that we think differently, because we already knew that we think so friggin' differently, but how we think differently. Because he and I think so differently, we are literally inverted. So his top 4 are my bottom 4, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And knowing that allows us to connect so well. What I'm noticing is generally my clients have one pairing at least in common with me. So for example, you've got the extroverted intuition that's a match. Christy, who is one of my clients that I work with a lot, she's in the 3P club on the Friday mornings. Her and I match on introverted thinking. And so generally one of the pairings is aligned. It's like we've either got the same decision-making functions or the same gathering functions.
Yeah.
People that have exactly the same functions as me, we're really good friends, but we don't work together because they don't need me. They've got the same functions. They can make decisions. They can look for they can do everything that I can do. So they're not signing up because they don't need to learn from me. But the people that have got one the same and want to leverage the other one. How do I leverage? So we've got extroverted intuition. You're leveraging my logic. So my introverted thinking
100%.
fuels your extroverted thinking.
Yep.
Because you want to gather logic from the world around you, and I'm giving my logic from the world, and it's a beautiful pairing. And so generally my clients are aligned on one of the pairs and not on the other. And so if we know that, I don't tend to attract people that are completely, and I have to check my other client. I can't remember all of my clients' functions, but generally the people that are completely opposite to me don't tend to work with me for very long. There's not enough alignment in how we gather information and process it. And it's the same as values. Like some values, my clients come to me and they're completely aligned, like we've got the same values. Some of them are aspirational and some of them are leveraged. And so when I look at values in marketing, it's like, what's the aligned, what's the aspirational, what's the leveraged? But if they were all aligned, they wouldn't be playing with me. If they're all aspirational or leveraged, we've got no common ground and it's really hard to build rapport. And for coaching, we need to build rapport. There's got to be something that we mesh on.
Totally.
And so we want all of that. Very cool conversation. Very cool conversation.